Chapter 9, The Political Process. Now, as I read this, I am not going to read like every little thing on the page, like all those sidebars and little notes that the textbook company made. I'm just going to read mostly the main text that is a lot more relevant to your test and to what basics of US government are. And of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, let's get started. Section 1, Public Opinion. Why it matters. The Vietnam War and public opinion. The Living Room War. In the late 1950s and early 1960s in Vietnam, a civil war was raging. On one side were communist Viet Cong guerrillas and their North Vietnamese supporters. On the other side was the anti-communist government of South Vietnam, supported by the United States. American public opinion was generally in favor of U.S. efforts in Vietnam, which were seen at the times as a way to stop the spread of communism. As early as 1963, however, some Americans began to protest U.S. involvement in South Vietnam. In 1965, U.S. military activity in Vietnam increased greatly. By 1968, more than 540,000 U.S. troops were in Southeast Asia, fighting a fierce and bitter war. As U.S. involvement in Vietnam increased, so did media coverage of the war. For the first time in history, people at home saw screens of war unfolding as they watched the evening news on television. Many people believed that this nightly living room war coverage was responsible for a change in public opinion. Perhaps influenced by media coverage, the public began to believe that the war's cost in terms of lives, money, and material was greater than its perceived rewards. Public opposition to the war increased in 1975 after 12 years of direct involvement and faced with mounting public opposition to the war. The United States withdrew its last military forces from Vietnam. Today, the Vietnam War is an example of how public opinion may affect public policy. What is public opinion? The aggregation of views shared by a segment of society on issues of interest or concern is called public opinion. These views may focus on foreign policy, such as the Vietnam War, or on domestic or local policy issues, such as reducing healthcare costs or debating the need for a new high school. Public opinion is complex. For example, many people believe that human actions lead to global warming. Others disagree. They see global warming as a natural phenomenon. So public opinion on the issue is divided. Also, people who agree on one issue, such as global warming, may differ with each other on another issue, such as gun control. Public opinion and public policy. Public opinion helps leaders shape public policy, that is, the choice the government makes and the action it takes in response to the particular issue or problem. Public opinion also indicates how well the government is responding to the will of the people. Public opinion can be viewed in two ways. The first is to consider the public as a single centralized body, a large group of people concerned about public issues. In the view, public opinion may lead or formed by the decisions and actions of important political or social leaders. For example, in 2002 and early 2003, that just shows how old this textbook is, President George W. Bush stated that intelligence reports indicated Iraqi President Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which poses a threat to U.S. national security. Based on those claims, most Americans supported the president's policy of a U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. By November 2006, however, public opinion about Iraq had changed enough to negatively affect the president's party in the midterm congressional elections. The second view of public opinion is that the public is many separate individual publics, each with its own opinion on one or a few issues. Each issue public interacts with one or more decision makers. In this view of public opinion, people's attitudes led public policy and the public agenda. For example, a neighborhood group's concerns might lead to a city council to reduce traffic in the area. Expressing public opinion. Responsible citizens try to shape public opinion. They may express their opinions by writing, weblogs, or letters to the mayor, or testifying at a public hearing. Active citizens may take part in marches or demonstrations. During the Vietnam War, for example, thousands of anti war protesters marched in cities and on college campuses. Many citizens also join and support groups or organizations that represent their views, such as Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Friends of the Earth. Many of these organizations have committees that donate money to political campaigns or provide information to try to influence local, state, or federal legislation, public policy issues important to the group. Finally, responsible citizens express their opinion by voting. The outcome of any election, local, state, or federal, fully reflects overall public opinion about the candidate or issue being voted on. But voting behavior, whether it is in a presidential election or a town's mayoral race, is complex. People may vote for a candidate because he or she disagrees with their general views, is the incumbent, shares their view on a single issue, such as cutting taxes, or just seems more friendly or likable than the other candidate. Forming public opinion. People's opinions are influenced by several factors, including their family, friends, school, and work experiences, and personal factors such as age, gender, race, and religion. The process by which people acquire political beliefs is called political socialization. Family. A person's family often has the most direct influence on his or her views. As children, we hear family members talk about political issues and current events. Even if we do not always understand what we hear, and even if we disagree with our family members, the conversation helps shape our attitudes about race, religion, politics, and other important social issues. School and work. School is where we formally learn about government, citizenship, and other values. You know from your own experience that peer groups influence opinions about what to wear, what music to listen to, and whether something is fair. Experiences in the late teens and early 20s also help shape personal opinions. At that stage, people are more independent of family influences. They may also face new influences at their place of employment. Other personal factors, age, race, gender, and religion, are also factors in shaping opinions. For example, a younger person's opinion about Social Security benefits and retirement plans may differ from the opinions of someone older. In some cases, a person's religious beliefs might influence his or her opinion about marriage, abortion, prayer in school, and other public policy issues. Media and public opinion. Public opinion and the public agenda may be shaped or determined by the mass media. Mass media are means of communication that provide information to a large audience. Your daily routine is probably filled with mass media. Mass media includes magazines, television news, news on the web, and the latest viral videos on the internet. Media impact. The media's effect on public opinion and public policy is most visible in two areas. It monitors, shapes, and determines the public agenda, and it covers electoral politics. The media reports and comments on issues that political leaders and the public consider important. It also reports when officials ignore public opinion. The media does not force people to take sides, but it forces attention on important issues. The growth of mass media. The most enduring form of mass media is print media, newspapers, and magazines. In this country, the relationship between the press and public opinion and politics go back to at least 1789. It was when John Fenno published the Federalist paper, the Gazette of the United States. The counter of the Federalist paper, Thomas Jefferson, and the Whigs supported the National Gazette, which began in 1791. Bitter partisan battles to capture public opinion were often waged in the party press. Following are other examples of print media's influence in public opinion. The penny press. These inexpensive newspapers covered issues of interest to working class people. Yellow journalism. This type of journalism uses sensationalism, scandals, and appeals to patriotism to attract and influence readers. The height of yellow journalism was from 1895 to 1898. Although average daily newspaper readership among adults have declined since its peak in the 1960s and 70s, About 48% of Americans, adults 18 years and older, report reading a newspaper daily. Now, keep in mind your textbook is old, so I doubt that number is even that high today. Radio was the first form of electronic media. In the 1920s, radio stations broadcast news and entertainment to millions of homes. In the 1950s, television replaced radio as the most influential form of electronic media. Today, even with the growth of the internet, political candidates at all levels rely on radio and TV ads to deliver their message. The internet has also changed mass media. In 1996, just 1 in 50 Americans depended on the internet as a daily source for news. Today, 1 person in 3 regularly gets his or her news online. Again, your textbook's super old, so I would suspect that that number is even higher today. At the same time, only 2/3 as many people today watch network TV news as watched it in 1996. However, most print media, such as the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, have an online edition, and broadcast and cable TV networks also have online news sites. Roles of media. The media shape public opinion in several ways, such as by the issues it covers and the ones it ignores. For example, TV newscasts may choose not to cover a particular issue. However, if a blogger talks about the issue, newscasts may then pick it up and the public may start discussing it. The type of coverage a topic receives is also important. For example, stories that describe a political candidate's experience create a different picture of the candidate than reports that focus on issues that have nothing to do with his or her experience. Criticism of the media. All kinds of mass media, print, broadcast, electronic, and the internet are subject to criticism from a variety of sources. The most common criticisms include the following: bias in reporting. Reporting may be slanted toward a certain point of view. For example, print and television news media are often described as being mostly liberal, while talk show radios are described as almost always conservative. Bias in story selection. A media outlet may focus on one issue and ignore or downplay others. Media defenders say that because the time or space available to cover news is limited, journalists must decide what issues to cover at a particular time. Factual inaccuracy. Critics warn that news sources, especially non-traditional sources, such as blogs or other internet news sites, may be careless about factual accuracy. For example, standards for and ways to check accuracy on the internet are still evolving. Media consolidation? Is that word? Okay. About 24 companies own most U.S. media outlets today. Critics argue that this media concentration destroys the independent sources of information our democracy needs. The future of media. News and information can now be delivered instantly to your cell phone, home computer, or PDA. I don't know what that means. Okay. Many Americans go online every day to get some or all of their news. Blogs, RSS feeds, and podcasts have grown rapidly as sources of daily news. People, not just journalists, share ideas about the limits of TV or print. However, just because news is more accessible does not mean it is more accurate. Today, even with the media consolidation, you have a choice of a wide variety of information sources. It is important not to rely on a single source. Using multiple sources will help you get accurate information and avoid propaganda or statements meant to influence public opinion or promote a cause or a viewpoint. Measuring public opinion. Sooner or later, you may be asked to share your opinion about new products or an upcoming presidential election. You may be part of a public opinion poll, a survey of people scientifically selected to provide options about something. Scientific polling is a way to determine public attitudes or preferences about consumer products, social issues, and political candidates. Most surveys today are scientific polls. The polling process. A well-designed poll is an accurate measure of public opinion. The accuracy of a poll depends on the number of people answering the questions, how those people are chosen, and how the questions are asked, and the absence of bias. The first key to a poll's accuracy is the sample, or the group of people who take part in the poll. The size of the sample is important. For example, mathematically, a sample about 1,500 people is sufficient to reflect the opinion of a sample universe of 230 million potential voters accurately. Second, the poll results to be accurate. The sample must be chosen at random from the sample universe. The sample universe is the total population or market of interest. Finally, the way questions are worded or the order in which they are asked can affect a poll's accuracy. For example, do you think the president is doing a good job? May produce results different from, is your overall opinion of the president very favorable, somewhat favorable, somewhat unfavorable, or very unfavorable? Also, asking the question after questions about controversial issues, rather than as the first question, may change how people answer it and therefore affect a poll's accuracy. A reliable poll states its margin of error, or uncertainty level. The margin of error, or sampling error, indicates a poll's accuracy and is given as a percentage above and below the poll's results. For example, a poll with a margin error of 3% may show that 37% of the respondents have a certain opinion. In the total population, then between 34% and 40% of people are likely to hold that opinion. Evaluating polls. Properly conducted polls produce reliable, accurate, objective, and bias-free results. In polling, bias refers to errors introduced by polling methods that lead to one outcome over others. Objectivity is freedom from bias and outside factors, such as timing, that may influence results. Polls and public opinion. Most major polls are created and conducted scientifically. However, polls are sometimes conducted in ways that produce certain results. For example, asking, do you favor or oppose the death penalty for those convicted of murder produces a different result than asking, which penalty do you prefer for people convicted of murder, the death penalty or life in prison? Either result might be used to shape public opinion in support of a particular group's political or social agenda. Exit polls. Another common type of scientific poll is the exit poll. Used on election day, an exit poll surveys a randomly selected fraction of voters after they have voted and tells pollsters how people voted before the official vote count. People may use exit polls results to predict the winners of all but very close races. Critics of exit polls argue that those predictions may discourage people from voting and may alter the results of some state and local races. Supporters of exit polls respond that studies show that the very few voters are influenced by the exit poll results. Today, to be safe, the exit poll results are not usually announced until voting has ended. Section 2, interest groups. Wow, that was just section 1. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to skip this. If you want to watch or read more about electing women, feel free to. But I'm just going to jump right into it. So, interest groups and what they do. Annie's List and the TFRW are two of the thousands of interest groups in the United States. A special interest group is an association of people who hold similar views or goals. Interest groups, also called advocacy groups, represent those views and goals and try to influence public policy and the public agenda to achieve them. Interest groups are especially important to people who feel their views are overlooked in political discussions. Interest groups work on every level, local, state, and national, in our representative democracy. These groups give people a way to monitor government actions, express themselves about government policies, and participate in social action. Interest groups organize people who share concerns, provide members with a means of political participation, supply information to the public and to policymakers. Many interest groups also have political action committees, or PACs, that support candidates for political office who agree with the group's position on the issues. A political action committee is an organization created to raise and contribute money legally to the campaigns of political candidates. Organizing interests. Individual citizens can initiate, influence, or change public policy or the public agenda in several ways. In fact, part of the responsibility of being a good citizen is to try to influence public policy. People can write letters to the editor or their state or federal representatives. They can give speeches or testify at legislative hearings, and they can vote. They may also join others and march in demonstrations. Sometimes, however, one person's actions are not enough. Joining an interest group gives each person's opinions more impact than it had when the person acted alone. People join interest groups knowing that working with others strengthens their cause. People who join groups to promote their common concerns include environmentalists, business owners, musicians, teachers, and members of minority groups. Sometimes interest groups form different sides of the same issue. For example, the American Immigration Control Foundation is a group that wants to limit immigration. The Coalition for Comprehensive Immigration Reform is a group that supports broad immigration reform. Both groups give their members political impact that the members would not have as individuals. Encouraging participation. People who feel strongly about an issue often want to do more than just vote for candidates who share their views. Being a member of a group gives individuals a way to take part in the political process at every level of government and helps the group to influence public policy. Active membership in interest groups seem to have declined in recent years. According to recent studies, Americans are joining fewer social groups and organizations than in the past, whether because of technological changes or for other reasons. However, although active membership in interest groups may be down, checkbook memberships, financial contributions to such groups have increased. Supplying information. Greater resources, such as more money, have allowed many interest groups to engage in new kinds of activities, such as lobbying campaigns or creating interactive websites to present their views and build a positive image for the groups. As a result, many interest groups can now exert influence in ways that exceed the power and that results from membership alone. An interest group's influence often comes more from the information it provides than from the activities of its members. Even a small group, such as Swift Boat Veterans for Truth in 2004, can be powerful if it effectively delivers its message to policymakers and the public. The 2004 presidential election provided an example of this. The group's television ads attacked Democratic presidential candidate Senator John Kerry and hurt his campaign. Since that election, swift voting has become to mean an attack on a candidate's truthfulness and patriotism. All right, then here are types of interest groups. So many of the thousands of interest groups in the United States represent economic interests and issues. Other groups, such as the TFRW, form around political, social, cultural, or religious issues. Still, other interest groups focus on foreign policy issues. Agricultural groups. Many interest groups represent the nation's farmers and agricultural industry. Some, such as the large American Farm Bureau Federation, represent farmers as a whole. Others, such as the much smaller National Potato Council, are commodity groups that represent certain types of farmers or a particular agricultural product. The National Potato Council represents U.S. potato growers on legislative, regulatory, environmental, and trade issues. Business groups. Organizations such as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Federation of Independent Business, or NFIB, are examples of business interest groups. The Chamber of Commerce represents business interests in general, while the NFIB represents the rights of small and independent business owners. Another type of business group called the Trade Association represents certain industries or parts of industries. For example, when you select a bag of pretzels from a vending machine, your choice matters to the Snack Food Association, a trade association that represents the snack food industry. Similarly, the American Wind Energy Association promotes the production of electricity from wind power facilities by supporting tax credits and other pro-growth policies. In general, trade associations support laws and policies that benefit their industry and oppose laws and policies that harm their interests. Most business groups and trade associations also have their PACs make campaign contributions to political parties and candidates. Labor groups. Most labor interest groups are also labor unions, groups of workers who do the same job or work in related industries. For example, The Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen exists to make sure that train engineers, conductors, and people who control the brakes and switches work under safe conditions. Another group, the Service Employees International Unit, represent people who work in healthcare, building, cleaning, and security, and public service jobs. Like business and trade association groups, unions and union members contribute to political campaigns. Many unions have a Committee on Political Education, or COPE, that directs the union's political activities, including fundraising and support for political candidates. Cause-based groups. Some groups, including many political interest groups, represent or promote a cause rather than the interest of a segment of societies. For example, Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a single-issue group devoted to fighting drunk driving and its causes. Another example is Common Cause, a group that works to strengthen public participation and confidence in the institutions of government. Finally, the Center of Civic Education is a national organization dedicated to promoting an enlightened and responsible citizenry. Societal groups. Some groups represent religious, social, racial, ethnic, and other segments of the population rather than economic or professional interest. Example of the societal groups include the National Organization for Women, NOW, the Eagle Forum, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, the American Muslim Alliance, and AARP, which represents older Americans. Professional groups. Some interest groups represent a particular profession, such as the American Medical Association and the American Bar Association, which represent doctors and attorneys, respectively. Such groups establish standards for their profession, influence the licensing and training of those who enter the profession, and educate the public and government about the professional interest in issues of concern to the profession. Functions of special interest groups. Interest groups do not change laws, but they do affect public opinion and public policy at every level of the government. A group's success is based on hard work, effective communication, and money. Groups support candidates and engage in lobbying to influence public officials and public policy. Endorsing candidates. One way groups influence public policy and legislation is to help elected candidates who support their views. An interest group may endorse, publicly declare its support for a particular candidate in an election. For example, certain social, religious, or labor groups often endorse Democratic Party candidates, just as other businesses, socials, or religious groups usually endorse Republican Party candidates. Whether a group endorses a particular candidate usually depends on the candidate's position on and support for the group's interests. Interest groups also participate in elections by having their PACs contribute money to the campaigns of candidates. PACs usually contribute to candidates who have supported the group's views in the past. In some cases, PACs give money to both candidates for an office, hoping that whoever wins will support the group's interest. For example, in the 2006 congressional elections, the National Association of Realtors split $3.7 million in campaign contributions, giving 48% to Democrats and 51% to Republicans. Lobbying. Interest groups participate in government at every level by lobbying or contacting a public official to persuade the official to support the group's interests. Groups lobby decision makers in government agencies as well as legislators. A lobbyist may visit with city council members about changing the zoning along a city street or talk to state representatives about reducing taxes. Lobbyists now use technology such as email campaigns to inform and influence officials, but their most effective tool are telephone calls and face-to-face conversations. I would probably argue today that social media probably would be even bigger. Informing public opinion. Interest groups often provide someone to testify, whether at a city council meeting, a state agency, or congressional hearing. To express and explain the group's interests, this public testimony generates support for the group and may influence lawmakers. Many groups and lobbyists practice grassroots politics. Grassroots is the name given to the lowest level of an organization or society. In grassroots politics, a group may organize a demonstration or march or get a large number of individual voters to contact a legislator or other official. The legislator may be influenced by the strong showing of support for a particular position. filing lawsuits. Another way interest groups influence public policy is through the legal system. Perhaps the best known lawsuit occurred in the 1950s when a group of parents in Topeka, Kansas, sued to end legal racial segregation in public schools. In 1954, in the landmark case Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, the Supreme Court ruled that racially segregated schools were illegal. The court also ordered that the African American students be admitted to public schools with all deliberate speed. Interest groups and the public good. American democracy includes both the principle of majority rule and the requirement that the minority rights to be protected. As you might expect, interest groups that represent majority interest and others that represent minority interest actively try to influence public policy and political issues. Benefits of interest groups. An important benefit of interest groups is that they give minority interests a voice in the political process. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s is a good example. Thousands of African Americans and their supporters united to draw society's attention to segregations, violence, and discrimination against African Americans. Other political minorities, such as neighborhood associations or hunters, may form their own interest groups. For example, rural landowners may unite to oppose a state's plan to build a major new highway. Criticism of interest groups. Some critics believe that interest groups have too much influence. A well-funded group, such as the Swift Boat Group mentioned earlier, can have an impact even with a small membership. Interest groups are also criticized for focusing on one narrow issue and ignoring broader social needs and policies. Critics also argue that interest groups often use appeals to people's emotions rather than finding reasonable solutions to the social problems they are addressing. Finally, critics sometimes argue that with effective interest groups on all sides of the issue, Congress may decide not to act. Limits to interest groups. In 2007, in the wake of the number of highly publicized lobbying scandals, Congress passed ethics and lobbying reform legislation. These new rules tightened House and Senate ethnic rules for legislators and limited some types of activities by lobbyists. Although the reforms were extensive, critics note that Congress has, in the past, passed rules and laws that try to weaken the links between elected officials, interest groups, contributions, and political influence. Many of these reform efforts have only temporarily succeeded. Interest groups find ways to use their resources to continue to influence the political process. As a result, citizens should learn what they can about who is supporting or opposing major public issues. Section 3, Political Parties. Okay, I'm going to skip this. You can read it if you like. The role of political parties. Political parties are important to our system. They're the way we nominate, elect, and monitor our representatives. A political party is an organization that tries to elect its members to public office so that its views can become public policy. Party ideology. Each political party has a basic set of ideals and goals about society and the role of government that its members and supporters generally share. When a party unites its ideals and goals into a social and political program, that program is the party's ideology. This ideology is what sets one party apart from the other. It also determines the party's place on the political spectrum, or the continuum of social and political beliefs that stretches from conservative on the right to liberal on the left. On the political spectrum, the Democratic Party is considered liberal and the Republican Party is considered conservative. Liberals generally support government action to change social, political, or economic policies that are believed to be unfair. Conservatives generally support limited government, lower taxes, and traditional social values. Also, within each party are moderates, or people who seek a middle ground between liberal and conservative positions. Furthermore, party members may not always be consistently liberal or conservative in their views. For example, a person may have conservative views about foreign policy but liberal views regarding social issues. Parties' three main roles. Wherever they fall on the political spectrum, parties play three main roles: nominate candidates for political office, assisting the electoral process, and helping to operate the government. The nomination process, or naming candidates for elective office, is a party's main function. A party's candidates may have their own views on specific issues, but their views must generally fit the party's belief to receive the party's support. Parties bring money, campaign workers, and other support to candidates, especially at state and local levels. In this and their other roles, parties train members to be future leaders. Second, in addition to nominating candidates, political parties aid the electoral process in the following ways. Each party has a position on all major issues. Parties educate people about these issues and try to motivate people to vote. Parties provide a brand name. When a candidate is affiliated with a party, voters have an indication of his or her views on political issues. Parties help the electorate, the body of people entitled to vote, register to vote, learn about issues and parties' positions, and find out where they vote. Informed voters may make better choices. Parties watch how office holders perform. Each party tries to ensure that its own office holders do the public's business well. At the same time, parties act as watchdogs of office holders from the other parties. Parties use their success and the mistakes of their other parties to attract voters to their own candidates for the next election. Finally, parties help run the government. For example, in each House of Congress, whichever party is the majority controls that House. People appointed to positions in the executive and judicial branches are usually members of the president's party. If one or both houses of Congress are controlled by one party and the president is held by a different party, parties may provide ways to these branches to work out their differences. Because they participate in government, political parties differ from interest groups, which pressure government from the outside. Also, most political parties address a variety of issues, but each interest group focuses on one issue and does not address the others. The American two-party system. The role that political parties play in a nation's political system depends on the type of party system the country has. Generally, the more parties there are, the smaller the role and influence of any particular party. Party systems. There are three basic types of party systems. There are the one-party, two-party, and multi-party systems. One-party system. A single political party controls government. Other parties may or may not be allowed to operate, but they usually have no power. Two-party system. Two major parties compete to government control. Other parties may exist and may affect elections, but they rarely have enough support to elect a national leader or control the legislature. The United States has a two-party system. Okay? Make that really clear right there. Bam. Okay. Multi-party system. Several parties compete for control. For example, India has about 12 major parties, while Italy's government has about 15 parties. Multi-party systems are the most common party system. I'm going to skip over this cool infographic. It is kind of cool to show how different presidential candidates there were and how they usually are voted in by chunks. Historically, in modern day, that's not so much the case. And just to prove how old your textbook is, they didn't know that Obama won back in 2008. So what? This textbook was probably made in 2007? All right, let's keep on going, shall we? All right, so generally, when no party has a consistent majority, unstable government can result. Often, several parties join to form a coalition or temporary alliance to create a majority. If one party leaves the coalition, the government may collapse. New elections may be needed. American political parties. The first American political parties emerged soon after the Constitution was ratified. They were the Federalist parties, not related to the Federalist supporters of the Constitution, and the Democratic Republican Party. Most of the Federalist Party were supporters of Alexander Hamilton, who believed that the nation's future lay in a strong central government, large cities, and a strong manufacturing base. Opposing the Federalist Party was the Democratic Republican Party, which was led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Jefferson believed the nation's strength was in its agricultural base and in ordinary citizens living in small communities. After 1824, the party split. The two factions evolved into today's two major U.S. political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. These two parties have now dominated American politics for more than 150 years. Even so, some elections voters have supported third-party and independent candidates. A third party is any political party in a two-party system besides the two major ones. An independent candidate is a candidate who is not associated with any party. Some third parties have affected the outcome of the election. For example, some people argue that the 2000 presidential election, Green Party candidate Ralph Nader may have won enough votes in Florida to keep Democrat Al Gore from winning that state in its electoral votes, with the result that Republican George W. Bush was elected to a new president. Party organization. Political parties are organized at all levels. For some local committees to the large national committees, each level contributes to the success of the party. Local parties. Local party structure vary from state to state. The most common local organization is a county party, which is usually run by a committee. A county chairperson handles the party's daily affairs. His or her and the local party's main job is to select candidates for local offices and to help elect the party's candidates at all levels. The county committee is usually selected by a party member from the precincts in the county. A precinct is the smallest unit of administering elections and local voting. Some cities have voting units usually used for city council elections called wards. A ward is a voting district made up of several precincts. State parties. Each state party is run by a central committee made up of representatives from the party's county committees. The state committee appoints a chairperson to manage the party's daily operations. Party leaders and the party members in each state support and try to elect local, state, and national candidates, especially the party's presidential candidate in their state. National parties. The national party of each major party is headed by the national committee of members for its state parties. A national chairperson leads a large paid staff and manages the party's operations. Major national parties have committees or fundraising, sporting campaigns, and other purposes. For example, each party has 2 congressional campaign committees whose primary mission is to elect the party's candidates to the House and Senate. Each party also sponsors affiliated organizations at the state and local level to attract specific groups of voters. Examples include the National Federation of Republican Women, the College Democrats of America, the National Teenage Republicans, and the Young Democrats of America. Political parties and the public goods. Despite Madison's concerns, political parties have benefited American democracy in a number of ways. At the same time, however, parties are often the objects of criticism. Benefits of political parties. Some political scientists suggest that one way the two-party system serves the public good is that both parties filter out extreme or unconventional ideas. Each party wants to attract enough voters to win and keep a majority in government. As a result, parties provide stability against rapid and disruptive change. In their efforts to maximize their voters, parties try to include as broad a base of support as they can. The two major parties are made up of distinct groups or constituencies. Okay, each with its own range of views. Generally, Democratic Party constituencies include labor unions, women, racial and ethnic minorities, educated urban voters. Republican constituencies in general include religious conservatives, corporate and business interests, and white men. Parties try to accommodate the diverse views of their whatever that word is. Okay. The result of parties' efforts to include a variety of opinions may be an increase in political and social stability. Because each major party represents a variety of groups and views, supporters who agree with most of the party's positions will not abandon the party over one issue with which they may disagree. This party loyalty also promotes stability by discouraging frequent short-term shifts in power that might make government less stable. Finally, parties provide a political brand name in much the same way a soft drink company does for its products. Voters may not need to know everything about the candidate to reach political decisions. They might vote for a party's candidate because overall, they support the party's views. Criticism of political parties. Some critics argue that by trying to appeal to as many types of voters as possible, the major parties lack unity, discipline, and loyalty. As a result, parties may not be able to fulfill all the campaign promises they make. It is true that the United States office holders from the same party stick together on issues less often than those in most other countries. Some people note that interest groups give money for campaigns and other party activities. These contributions, people argue, influence parties and their office holders to act in ways that benefit narrow interests rather than serve the larger public good. Critics also charge the parties or Critics also charge that parties are full of office seekers who are interested more in their own personal success than in serving the public good. For example, a candidate may express support for a certain policy during a campaign because doing so helps the person get elected, even though in a previous campaign or office, the candidate had held and stated a position directly contrary to his or her new position. Voters and other candidates often call this reversal of position a flip flop. Finally, some people are angered by the partisan bickering between the two major parties. They charge that parties offer simple, narrow solutions to complex problems and are more interested in winning public opinion and votes than in solving the complex issues confronting the nation. All right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Jesse Ventura. That is an interesting time in Minnesota history. If you ever are bored and want to Wikipedia that, interesting time. And no, I'm not old enough to actually be around for that time period when he was governor. Anyway, let's move on. Section 4. Oh, I hope this is the last section. Please be. Please be. Okay. I'm gonna skip the why it matters. Sorry. You can read it if you like. All right. Oh, what is section 4? The electoral process. Ooh, that's important. So, organizing and financing campaigns. Political campaigns are expensive in both time and money. A person who wants to run for office must determine if he or she can raise the money for a campaign and if he or she is willing to spend the time it will take. So, why do people bother to run for office? First, holding elective office is considered an honor in our society. Also, most candidates are public minded people who want to contribute to society. They are fulfilling a citizen's responsibility to act for common good in public affairs. Finally, some people run for office because they want the power. Political campaigns. Campaigning is hard work. Local candidates may spend hours walking door to door and attending local functions to meet voters. Presidential candidates travel from state to state to appear at rallies, fundraisers, and meetings. Candidates are trying to reach and attract enough voters to win. Candidates rely heavily on the media, especially television, to spread their message, and I'd argue today also social media. They buy airtime to run political ads or stage events to get free TV coverage. Today, most candidates have websites and weblogs. I, I, I think by weblogs, I think they mean like social media. And they hold virtual town meetings where voters email or instant message questions to the candidate. Money and campaigns. A candidate spends a lot of time raising money. Sources of campaigns fund include political action committees or PACs, the candidate's party, private individuals, the candidate's personal funds, and in some cases, public funds. Money donated to an individual campaign is known as hard money. State and federal laws limit how much money individuals and organizations can give to candidates. Candidates must file reports with state or federal officials listing how much hard money they have received and spent. Contributions called soft money are a way to get around the limits on hard money contributions. Soft money is money given to a party rather than a specific candidate. Choosing candidates. How does a person get his or her name on the ballot as a candidate? Nomination is the first step in the electoral process, as you read in Section 3. Nominating candidates is one of the functions of a political party. Parties select candidates by either primary elections or caucuses. Either way, a candidate usually makes an announcement in the company of party officials. The nominating process varies from state to state, but it usually involves one or more of the following methods. Self-announcement. The first step to become a candidate is to announce that you are running for a certain office. You might announce that you are seeking a specific party's nomination for the office, or you may decide to run as an independent candidate. Sometimes people who fail to get their party's support will run as a self-announced candidate. Self-nomination usually involves a registration process, such as filing or paying a filing fee or circulating a petition signed by a certain number of registered voters to get on the ballot. Nomination by petition is often used at a local level. Candidates for local offices must submit petitions with the signatures of a certain number of qualified voters who reside in the election district. A candidate can run as a write-in candidate and avoid the petition process. Write-in candidates announce they are running for an office, usually as an independent candidate or as a challenger to the party's preferred candidate, and ask voters to write in their name on the ballot. Write-in candidates almost always lose. If they had more support, they would not run as a write-in. One of the most famous, though unsuccessful, write-in candidates was Eugene V. Debs, who ran for president in 1920. Debs, a leader of the Socialist Party, has been convicted under the Espionage Act of 1917 for a speech he gave in 1918. Although his conviction made him ineligible to hold office, Debs ran a write-in campaign from his prison cell in Atlanta, Georgia. Debs received almost 1 million write-in votes out of approximately 26 million votes cast. Caucuses. In some states, candidates are chosen by a caucus. A caucus is a meeting of party members who select the candidates to run for election. The caucus system began in the early 1800s, before today's election process existed. State party leaders would meet and select all the candidates for office. When national party conventions first appeared in 1831 and 32, state party leaders still met in state-level caucuses, where, in addition to selecting candidates, they chose delegates to the National Convention. Party leaders controlled both who went to the convention and how they voted when they got there. In the 1890s, reformers began to take the nominating power out of the hands of the party leaders and let party members vote for the candidate of their choice. Caucuses are still used in the new states such as Iowa. Precinct caucuses, the lowest level, are open to all party members in the precinct. Starting in the precincts, caucuses endorse candidates for local offices and select delegates to the caucus or convention at the next level, such as the county or district. Caucus members select the delegates based on each delegate's stated preference for a particular candidate. The candidate with the most votes at the precinct level generally has the most delegates at the next level. Conventions. Caucuses and conventions are similar in some ways and different in others. Only party members take part in both, and both are ways to nominate candidates. However, a convention is open to the public. Also, delegates to a convention represent party members who are not there. Local conventions choose delegates to the party's state convention and may nominate candidates for local offices. State conventions choose candidates for statewide offices and in presidential election years select delegates to the party's national nominating convention, which chooses the party's candidates for president and vice president. Primary election. If more than one member of a political party seeks the same office, the direct primary, meaning first, election is held. In a direct primary, the party's candidate for office is chosen directly by the voters. There are two types of direct primary elections, closed and open. All right, we'll get to that in a sec. Here's a flowchart of how presidential candidates are selected to become either the party nomination or, well, if they're successful, to become president. So here's kind of a flowchart of how that all happened, if you're interested. Okay, so where were we? So in a closed primary, only voters registered as party members can vote in selecting that party's candidates. In an open primary, any registered voter may vote in either party's primary election, but only in one of them. Most states hold presidential primary elections, which allow voters to express their preference for a presidential candidate. The primary may also choose some or all of the state party members who will be delegates to each party's national convention. Each party's presidential candidate is chosen after all the states have been held their primary elections. For both major parties, primaries, not party leaders or nominating conventions, play the greatest role in determining who the candidates for president will be. Candidates, therefore, want to win the early primaries to show their strength in voters and build momentum for the nomination. Traditionally, Iowa and New Hampshire hold the first nominating contest, which I think is fairly true today, but I think some other states are popping up now. Yeah. Okay. Recently, though, other states have sought to hold their primaries as early as possible. States with the early primaries attract candidates as well as the money that comes with them and can influence the nomination process. Voting and voter behavior. After the candidates have run their campaigns, it is time for voters to choose. Voting is a right, and too many people a duty. And in our democracy, it is a person's most direct and powerful act of popular sovereignty. In recent presidential elections, however, fewer than two-thirds of eligible voters voted. In years with no presidential election, turnout may reach the mid 40% range. In state and local elections, voter turnout is usually even lower. Why don't people vote? There are a number of reasons, such as voter apathy, disaffection with government, and the belief that voting will not make any difference. The competitiveness of a race also affects turnout. Voters the voters are more likely to vote in close races that they are in races where the outcome seems predictable. Voting requirements. To qualify to vote in a general election, the person must be a U.S. citizen at least 18 years of age and a resident of the state of which he or she wishes to vote. Except in North Dakota, you cannot vote unless you are registered to do so. I don't know if that's still true today. The registration requirement prevents ineligible people from voting. It also keeps people who have not registered from voting, even if they are eligible. Some experts believe that the registration requirement is the main reason the voting rate in the US is so low. In recent years, governments have made registration easier. States are required to let citizens register by mail and when they renew their driver's license. Some states are considering internet registration and registration at the polls on election day, which the state of Minnesota does have that last one there. So just FYI. All right, voter behavior. Many factors from being the incumbent to being considered likable can influence the way a voter votes. Campaigns address as many they factors as the voters will feel that the candidate deserves to win. Four main factors influence why people vote the way they do. Party identification, so some voters rely greatly on and respond to a candidate's party affiliation. About a third of voters identify themselves either as strong Republicans or strong Democrats. Issues. Voters' view on issues that are important to them, such as abortion, healthcare, and taxes, can affect their choice in candidate. A candidate's background. A voter's evaluation of a candidate's record, personality, integrity, age, and character affects the choices the voter makes. And the voter's background. A voter's age, gender, race, family beliefs, and income and education level all affect how he or she chooses the candidate.